And in that darkness, there was a vacuum. 20,000 people, breathing in at the exact same moment. It's a strange, heavy silence. The kind of silence that's so full of anticipation, it feels louder than any noise. Everyone in that building was thinking the same name. A name that had been whispered, debated, and mourned for months. A name that represented perhaps the biggest what-if in modern wrestling history. They didn't dare say it out loud. The rumors were just rumors. The hope was just hope. It couldn't really happen. Not like this. And then, the first click, a hi-hat. Not the theme they knew, not the familiar swaggering anthem of the boss. This was different, colder, more cinematic. A slow, deliberate beat dropped. The lights flashed, not with a frantic energy, but with an artistic, rhythmic pulse. And there, on the ramp, a silhouette. It was her, but it was not her. The signature blue hair was gone. The boss glasses, a relic of the past. This was someone new, someone rebuilt. The camera frantically zoomed in. The name flashed on the giant screen, Mercedes Moné. For half a second, the arena was frozen. A collective gasp. They were processing the visual against the name. It is her. And then, the sound. It wasn't a cheer. It was a detonation. A pressurized release of months of frustration, hope, anger, and speculation. It was a roar that didn't just fill the arena. It shook the very foundations of the building. This wasn't a return. It was a resurrection. Let's try to understand that sound. In the business, they call it a pop. But this was something else entirely. This was an explosion of validation. For every single fan who had argued online, for every person who tweeted, "She deserves better," for every critic who said she threw her career away, this was their "I told you so" moment, screamed at the top of their lungs. The camera work, usually so precise and controlled, suddenly became beautifully chaotic. The operator was just as stunned as the audience. The lens panned wildly, desperately trying to capture the sheer scope of the reaction. And we saw it. We saw a grown man in the front row, a championship belt he'd brought from home hanging from his shoulder, with his hands locked on top of his head, tears streaming down his face. He was in complete, joyous disbelief. We saw a group of young women, dressed in the new colors, screaming so hard their faces were crimson. The commentary team, the professionals paid to describe the action, were gone. They weren't analysts anymore. They were fans. One was just repeating, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," his voice cracking. The other had simply taken his headset off, knowing rightfully that he could not possibly compete with the noise. Mercedes just stood there. She didn't pose, she didn't pander, she didn't point, she just absorbed it. A slow, knowing, almost dangerous smile crept across her face. She knew this would happen. She bet on it. This single moment wasn't just about a familiar face showing up. It was about a defiant statement being made. That statement, simple and clear, was, "You don't own me." And in that arena, 20,000 people roared back in absolute agreement. They weren't cheering for Sasha Banks. They were cheering for Mercedes. Now, let's change our perspective. Let's move just 50 feet away from that ramp, into the darkness, behind the massive LED screen. We are in the gorilla position. This is the nerve center of the show. This is where the producers, the agents, the executives, and the other wrestlers are watching. The reaction in the arena is pure, unfiltered joy. The reaction backstage? It's complicated. As that new, haunting music hit, every single monitor in the backstage area was suddenly blocked by bodies. Veterans, rookies, champions, and crew members. Everyone stopped what they were doing to see it for themselves. We can imagine a veteran producer, a man who has seen every great return from Hogan to Austin to Rock, cracking a rare, satisfied smile. He knew, in that instant, they had gold. But then, the camera in our minds pans. We see another top-tier talent, a champion in her own right. Someone who stayed when Mercedes left. Someone who held the division together. Her face isn't celebratory, it's stone. It's a look of pure, unfiltered calculation. So, she's back, and they gave her this, and they... You have to understand, the walkout months prior wasn't just a news story. It was a division in the locker room. It was a philosophical line drawn in the sand. You were either with the company, or you were with the principle of knowing your worth. And Mercedes, she was the principle. Her return wasn't just a comeback. It was a power play. She had left on her own terms, and now she was returning on her own terms. The pop from the crowd was deafening, but the silence in that locker room, the unsaid, vibrating tension, was even louder. While the concrete of the arena was still shaking, the real chaos began. Not on the mat, but in the cloud. The digital world didn't just break, it fractured. Within 60 seconds, Sasha Banks was the #1 trend worldwide. But here was the fascinating, brilliant part. The #2 trend was Mercedes Moné. It was a global identity crisis playing out in real time. She had, in one entrance, created a paradox. News outlets that wouldn't touch wrestling with a 10-foot pole were suddenly scrambling. ESPN, Forbes, Variety. They all ran the headline, Sasha Banks Returns. But the footage, the music, and the giant screen all showed Mercedes Moné. It was a masterclass in branding. She had forced the entire world to learn her real name. She had made her old billion-dollar moniker obsolete in 30 seconds. Podcasters who had confidently, smugly declared her career over were frantically deleting old episodes. Critics who said she fumbled the bag and committed career suicide were suddenly tweeting about her genius, her bravery, her master plan. But it was the fan reaction that told the true story. The digital avalanche of fan art, the analytical videos, the endless stream of consciousness. It wasn't just, wow, she's back. It was, wow, she did it. She bet on herself, disappeared into the wilderness of speculation, and re-emerged not just as a star, but as a brand. She had done the impossible. She had left the biggest entertainment empire on earth and forced them to welcome her back. Not as their creation, Sasha Banks, but as the woman she always was, Mercedes. The internet didn't just break, it bowed. The eruption fades. The digital confetti is swept up. The headlines grow old. What remains? The pressure. The suffocating, inescapable weight of a legacy she tried to leave behind. You see, Sasha Banks wasn't just a name, it was a standard. The boss was a character who, along with 3 other women, redefined an entire industry. That name was on the marquee of the first ever Women's Hell in a Cell. That name was in the first ever women's main event of a pay-per-view. That name was on the first ever women's tag team titles. That ghost was still in the ring with her. Now, as Mercedes Moné, she had to do it all over again. But this time, it was infinitely harder. Before, she was the underdog. She was the revolutionary fighting against the system, scratching and clawing for respect. Now, she was the system. She was the multi-million-dollar gamble. She was the walking, talking proof that one person could be bigger than the machine, and the machine does not like that. The expectations were now suffocating. Every match she had would be compared to her 5-star classics. Every promo she cut would be judged against the iconic deliveries of the boss. She wasn't just fighting the current roster. She was in a main event against her own past. The crowd erupted because they remembered Sasha. But Mercedes needed them to believe in her. That pop, as loud and as historic as it was, wasn't a coronation. It was a question. You're back. You got what you wanted. Now what? The following week, the music hits again. The pop is still massive, a roar of thunder, but this time it's different. It's not the shock of a return, it's the anticipation of an explanation. The crowd is desperate. They want to know why. Mercedes Moné, no longer in her shocking entrance gear, but in a sharp, expensive suit that screamed CEO, walks to the ring. She doesn't strut. She glides. She takes the microphone, and the entire building falls into a dead, electric silence. 20,000 people waiting for the word, waiting for her to mention Sasha, waiting for her to talk about the boss, or her old partners, or the company she famously walked out on. She looks down the barrel of the camera. The microphone trembles just slightly in her hand, and she begins. For my entire career, I was told what to be. The crowd hangs on every syllable. I was told what to say. I was told what to wear. I was told who to be. A few cheers of agreement, but mostly just silence. They built a blueprint, but they forgot to ask the architect. Chills. She never mentions the old name. She never mentions the company. She doesn't talk about the past at all. She only talks about the future. She talks about control. She talks about value. She talks about freedom. This isn't a wrestling promo. It's a declaration of independence. It was, in its own way, terrifyingly risky. She was actively rejecting the very nostalgia that caused the eruption just 1 week prior. She was telling the fans, "Thank you for that. But that's over. You either follow me, Mercedes, or you can stay in the past." The merchandise is selling out. The ratings are up. On the surface, Mercedes Moné is the new centerpiece, the savior the company needed. But backstage, a different, more sinister story is unfolding. A quiet, bubbling resentment. Let's call it the company person's dilemma. Imagine for a moment, you're one of the wrestlers who didn't walk out. You're one of the talents who stayed. You worked through creative storylines you hated. You took losses you didn't agree with. You did what was best for business, every single night, waiting your turn. And you watch Mercedes, the one who took her ball and went home, get the pyro, the new music, the protected status, the main event slot, and the monster paycheck. To you, it feels like a betrayal. So, one of them might think, wiping off their makeup in the locker room. The lesson is, if you don't like it, just go home, and they'll pay you more to come back. A poison starts to seep into the well. Her return, as celebrated as it was by the public, becomes a source of deep, internal conflict. Every interaction is layered. A hello in the hallway feels cold. A tag in a match feels stiff. The other talent, the ones who paid their dues in the traditional way, now look at her as the exception. The one who broke the rules and was rewarded for it. The eruption from the fans was a sound of revolution. But to the wrestlers in the back, it was the sound of a system they no longer understood, and it created an invisible, massive target on her back. We see the eruption, we see the star, we see the CEO. But let's zoom out. Let's rewind. Let's imagine a scene we were never meant to see. Months earlier, a kitchen table, no cameras, no lights. Mercedes is there, no makeup, no bright blue hair. She's just a woman. Across from her, maybe her husband, maybe her mother, maybe her closest friend, and she has to say the words. I'm walking away from everything, the money, the fame, the security, the guaranteed future. Imagine the fear in that room, the sheer, terrifying, stomach-dropping risk. We see wrestlers as larger-than-life characters, but they are people, people with mortgages, people with families who depend on them. Walking out of a multi-million-dollar ironclad contract isn't brave in that moment. It's insane. It's a gamble that 9 times out of 10 leads to ruin. It's the belief in oneself against all available evidence. It's the quiet, "What have I done?" in the middle of the night. Now fast forward. That same kitchen table, that same family watching the return on television. When that new music hits and that crowd detonates, that's not just a cheer for a wrestler. For that family, that sound is relief. It's the sound of the gamble paying off. It's the universe screaming back that the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the financial uncertainty, it was all worth it. We see the tears of the fans in the front row. But the most important tears, the ones that really mattered, were the ones shed in that living room. from the people who knew the true terrifying cost of that pop. The cheers are addictive. The validation is powerful. But they are also a cage. Mercedes wanted freedom. She wanted control. But what she got instead was a new kind of prison. The prison of expectation. When you're Sasha Banks, you can have a bad match. You can have a bad promo. The machine supports you. The brand is indestructible. You'll be back in the main event next month anyway. But when you're Mercedes Moné, the woman who bet on herself, the one who claimed she was the system, you have no margin for error. Every single time she steps through that curtain, she isn't just having a match. She is justifying her existence. She is justifying her contract. She is justifying the walkout. She has to be perfect. Every promo must be a sermon. Every match must be a classic. If she fails, if she slips even once, the whispers will start. She's not as good as she thought she was. She should have just stayed. The boss was the real star. The crowd erupted because they believed she was a revolutionary. But now, she has to be the revolution, every single night, all by herself. That level of pressure. It doesn't just make you a star, it can break you. She is no longer just a wrestler. She is an idea. And being an idea is a much heavier burden than being a boss. She fought for a new crown, and now she must bear the weight of it, alone. Weeks have passed. The initial explosion of her return has settled into the demanding, grinding rhythm of the weekly show. The pressure is, as we expected, mounting. One night, after a grueling main event, Mercedes is in the trainer's room, a bag of ice pressed against her shoulder. The door creaks open. It's a legend, a Hall of Famer, someone who has seen it all, done it all, and has the scars to prove it. He's not in gear. He's in a suit, holding a cup of coffee. He sits down, not next to her, but across from her. He doesn't say anything for a long moment. He just looks at her as if studying a puzzle. "That pop," he finally says, his voice quiet and raspy. "I've heard a few of those in my time. Biggest sound in the world. It's a drug, isn't it?" Mercedes just nods, too tired to speak. He continues. "The pop is the easy part, kid. It's the validation. It's the I'm here. But it's not the work." He leans forward, his eyes intense. "You came back as a revolutionary. You came back as the one who won against the office. They love you for it. But they are also waiting for you to fail. The office, the boys in the back, even the fans. They love a revolution, but they hate a revolutionary who gets comfortable." He stands up, placing his empty coffee cup in the trash. "You didn't just come back for a pop, did you? You came back to reign. And the reign is the hard part. Don't let the sound of their cheers drown out the sound of the knives being sharpened. We have spent this entire time analyzing the moment, the sound, the reaction, the consequences. We've talked about the pressure, the legacy, the conflict, the future. We have treated this entire event, her return to the arena, as the climax of her story. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if the eruption, the chaos, the headlines, what if that wasn't the victory? We are conditioned, as fans, to think that the loudest moment is the most important one. We chase the pop. We chase the high. But the real story, the true quiet twist, is that Mercedes Moné won months before she ever stepped back into that arena. The victory wasn't the return. The victory was the walkout. The victory was the moment she chose silence over a paycheck. The moment she chose anonymity over fame. The moment she chose herself over a character. Sasha Banks was a creation. A brilliant, historic, legendary creation, but one owned by someone else. Mercedes Moné is a person. The eruption in that arena, as historic as it was, wasn't the start of her new journey. It was the result of it. It was the physical, audible proof that the impossible gamble she made in that quiet kitchen, the one that cost her everything, had been the right move all along. The fans weren't just cheering for a returning superstar. They were, whether they knew it or not, cheering for a woman who had successfully bought her own name, her own soul, back.